So I think one hypothesis I have right now is since Ari and Ezreal are doing well in the stats, is like experimenting with blue buff and like flexing.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that's like kind of the situation here. And Corki wasn't that good last patch early, and I'm like not sure if I should be
Yeah, he
taking
was.
Corki here.
I think you want to see what items you get first, probably. If you get like, I think if you get tier, sword, or bow, you probably can take Corki. If you get anything else, it's
Yeah.
probably not a Corki grab. Corki's interesting in that if you have good items for him early, he's like very, very strong. If you don't have anything for him though, he can actually struggle to kill units, even though he's considered like one of the best units on this patch. I agree. Last patch he struggled a bit, but especially with the thing with Corki is that if you have a tier, he's actually gets a 3 auto first cast instead of a 5 auto first cast. So even just like a normal like
Oh,
any tier on him is super super high impact. Just prismatic symphony, gotcha. Actually, if you want to go back and look at the augments, not that anything went wrong, I just want to take a closer peek at them.
oh yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, I think. I mean, I think hologram and cyber uplink here definitely suck. I think rerolling those are very very good. You can consider March. There are there are country lines that you can play with March. That you can still play like Riven Yone stuff where you have like Hodge open Crick Glove or open Cloak for like QSS for Riven maybe or like even Shroud. So I definitely reroll left and middle first. But I think you do.
Mhm.
Um, you can maybe play it a little bit and just see. Or if you just don't want to play March, you can reroll that as well. Obviously, I think it's the safest one to keep for now. Yep, yeah. So you did reroll. Yeah, I think that's perfect. And then birthday present is great. Buried treasure is obviously something that people love. It's 6 items. It's really good. So I think at this point, if you want to reroll March, which you did, you totally feel comfortable doing it. I think that's great.
Yeah, at this point, I'm like likely lose streaking since I don't have a clear direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like
Yeah,
birthday
I
present
think
you usually want to play from like kind of a stronger tempo spot, right?
yeah, birthday
Maybe
present
not
you want to play
always.
when you're very comfortable slamming your items. And I think one of the biggest things this patch, I think we talked about this a little bit last time too. But one of the biggest things this patch as well, I'm going to keep driving this home because I think it's very, very important, is that you should be really playing towards things that use your early components well, right? So, for example, like it's not always take Corki. Corki's very good this patch, but skipping Corki there is fine if you don't have items for Corki. But if you have items for Corki, you should buy the thing that can hold your items really well this patch, right? This is very true for last patch too, where if you play the game more so in the way of saying like, okay, I'm not item holding my Ezreal on my Corki. I'm building Corki items on my Corki, right? Or you're building any items on your Annie. And if you play more like that this patch, you get rewarded. So, and this is true for last patch too. You get rewarded so much, right? So buried treasure is obviously great if you're not comfortable selling any of your items. So I don't think you have to be here. I think it's totally reasonable to be like, okay, I don't want to slam Hodge, I don't want to slam um, Adaptive Helm, and you probably don't want to slam QSS because no one likes slamming QSS in stage 2. So I think if you want to grease your items here and say buried treasures and sit until you find something that is really high impact, that's totally fine. And I think birthday present is definitely something more reserved for. Like you could take it here, and really if you have something that you could slam Hodge on, I would say, or Adaptive Helm comfortably here. I think taking birthday present is totally fine, but buried treasure is the safer option unless you kind of ease your way into finding the thing that wants to hold your items really well. But yeah, I guess this is just I think an important point, maybe something that um, is a big thing to think more about just in general. Again, same thing as last patch where always try to find a headliner early that uses your items or find some way to use your items early if you can. Even if you're you don't have to if you're not comfortable playing around adaptive helm late game, then that's probably something or like Hodge or any item late game. That's a sign that you want to work more on understanding how that item works and what units want that item, right? And what situations. Because then you can have a lot more stage twos where even if you go like 4-win-1 loss or like 3-win-2 loss, you're in a much better spot. Because especially with the straight changes, you just are healthier. You have more gold than the guy who went 4 loss 1 win or like lost 3 rounds and won 2. So winning rounds is like a great way to make money, and it's just a good way to make yourself win rounds and also just give yourself clear direction early.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Buried Treasure is great though. Hell yeah.
So I probably should have just slammed adaptive here, but I was like, I think I was tunnel visioning on blue buff because I wanted to experiment with Ari and Ez.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think so. In this spot now, where you don't have to slam adaptive, I think, because you took an augment that scales a little bit and that is going to give you so many items that it's not like the end of the world if you don't slam an item. So I think not making like what in your mind might be a mediocre item, and that's a totally fair estimation of adaptive helm if it's not doesn't really fit well into the things you like to play. I think sitting on it and not making it is totally fine. You can just look to lose, make better items. I would even say that you probably don't even want to make TG quite yet if you're not gonna make adaptive
Mhm.
helm, because it's, I mean, you can. It's might kill an extra couple units. It really depends on when it rolls. It's kind of an RNG item in that regard, right? Where sometimes you might roll Deathblade Taric, and sometimes you might roll like, like Warmogs, whatever Taric, and then it's really good. But if you have a more econ centric stage 2 here, I think it will reward you a lot, because it makes more sense with your augment, right? It's a very clean progression to say, okay, I'm picking an augment that scales up over the course of stage 2, so I'm going to let myself be weak until I naturally find myself being stronger. And so looking for like really good items there and reading out a blue buff if you think it's really good is a good way to do that. I will say that Annie, I don't think holds blue buff super well with Evo shows, right? Because I think she ends up being like 32 mana, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, interesting. I guess I don't do the math like you do. I just look at the stats, and the stats have like I think the last two patches said blue buff's better than both Shojin and adaptive.
Yeah, I feel like once you get into, if you have like Spellweaver chosen Annie, or you get to 4 emo, I think blue buff's really good. But I'm almost positive that 2 emo Annie is 32 mana, which I only do the math for mana because it's the only thing that like math super matters for. But like
Yeah.
it's a full auto diff, right? If you have like Lulu though, it's probably it evens out to be the same because you just get that 3 mana back through Hyper Pop. But yeah, I'd be curious what the stats are actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
didn't break the
positive.
stats down by 2 and 4 emo, so I'm gonna take a look at that.
It is a very good item in general, and I think Spellweaver Annie does want blue buff really badly over Shojin, or Adaptive Helm, but Emo Annie I think does end up using. We actually just watch. Yeah, she autos 4 times if you notice. Uh, I guess with the emo procs it can change a little bit too, but um,
Hmm.
she ends up with 30 out of 32, which is a little unfortunate. And that's one of those things where like this is a very good item on a board later in the game, right? But it's probably way better on something like a Corki right now, or something like a Kaisa, or like even like a Sarakin or something maybe, than it is on this Annie, right? Where like Shojin was straight up probably just a stronger item immediately. And obviously, it's start of a
Hmm.
patch, you want to experiment with blue buff stuff, sure, right? Go ahead. Um, but there is a stronger item maker right now that also has good lines out of it, right? Like Shojin has great lines out of it, Adaptive Helm has great lines out of it, and so that's I think a great example of what I just talked about in terms of making items for what you have on your board right now, instead of making items what you want to have on your board, however many rounds from now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think last patch I would for sure have slammed adaptive and just played in between like disco and
Yeah,
Karthus.
but also I mean, yeah, like you said, blue's great, works on Ez and Ari. It's it's totally fine. Alrighty. Oh, the double sword is a little awkward. Probably ends up being like what, GS Warmogs instead of Nashers, probably, right?
Yeah, so I was thinking that to like still keep the Ezreal Zed line open,
Yep.
but then GS isn't as good on Ari compared to
I think
Nasher.
Yeah. So I think this one is fine. The big reason why this is really good, it seems like a similar issue or a similar thing to what we talked about a second ago, where like technically Nashers is also just better on Annie than GS here, right? But item economy, you have to like also balance item economy with that, and your items are so much better if you don't use one of those belts for your Annie. It is
Yeah.
so much better item wise, and leave yourself open to as stuff is great, where you're trying to play this flex line between the two of them.
Hmm.
Alrighty.
So I rerolled Harmless. I mean, I probably should have rerolled Radiant first since I already have so many items. This right now is valuable,
Yeah, I
but
think
I'm leaning
I'm
towards new
addicted to
recruit
taking this
Appies.
augment. Sure, yeah,
Which
I
one?
think
Radiant?
Harmless is totally fine to reroll. I'm addicted to Radiant Relics. I think it's really fun. It actually, I mean, so the thing is, it is pretty nice too, because it either finishes your friendly items or finishes your anti items immediately and leaves you open to a secondary carry, which I think is really nice, right? Because if you're playing towards Ez,
Mm,
you get like BTZ potentially. If you're playing towards Ari, you get like an Akali dual carry or that Zed dual carry again, and you do really want items for everything. Um, that being said, obviously maybe get a super fan item later on too, and you could end up with too many components. I do think though, so items in general, they get very multiplicative in value the more items you have on the same unit, right? So like a Nashor's on an Annie that has a blue buff and a JG is much stronger than a Nashor's on an Annie that has nothing. Um, Similarly
right.
speaking, if you have a lot of items already, Radiant Relics gets a lot better because it means you're getting that full multiplicative value of having 3 items on the same unit. And so I wouldn't shy away from a Radiant item just because you have a lot of components. I would actually lean into it a little bit more because you have a lot of components. That being said, new recruit's great if you're playing this 4 cost flex stuff. Um,
Mhm.
So I think it's fine to think when you recruit, but yeah, Radiant Relics is really, really good if you have a lot of components because it means you get to that 3-item carry faster. That 3-item, like frontline 3-item carry faster. And so you get a lot of extra multiplicative value guaranteed, which you'll get there eventually anyways. But, the earlier that happens, the better. And then you can always just, if you get too many items, just find a board that uses those extra items is the beauty of TFT, especially this set, right? Is that, you can just play that extra Zed or play that Akali or find some way to tech in like an Ezreal or whatever you want to use whatever items you get. After that, it just is a lot of power immediately. Also, it's just fun to look at Radiant items. They're pretty. So
Yeah, that makes sense. And probably between the two, Radiant's definitely stronger right now.
For sure, definitely a lot stronger. I mean, you already played the game a little bit more towards playing for this like high cap for cost stuff, which I think the fact that you've already been playing the game towards that way, it is great that you're staying in line. We talked about this like a lot in the past, and I think it's great that you have this thought process towards the beginning of the game through stage 2, and you're sticking with it by wanting to recruit, where you're saying, okay, I'm going to spike really hard in this level 8 thing and playing, maybe you're not playing the strongest stage 2 or stage 3, and that's totally fine. To try to get to this big stage 4, I think this is a style that obviously works, and it's, again, as long as you have a lot of synergy in your decision making, and which you do in the situation, it's going to be fine more than likely. It's just it can be a little less consistent currently in TFT because there's a lot of value in just playing around what you have right now and being strong when you can, and then just adapting to what you get. But it certainly can work, right? It's how a lot of people play the game.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at that sword and cloak and thinking basically I have a pretty good setup for either Ari and Akali with the BT or Zed with the BT. So it's like I have a blue buff holder, I have a BT holder. Although the Radiant, like you said, it actually the fact that I could have a melee and a range gives me more options for that relic as well.
Yeah, there's like you can pick anything, right? You can pick frontline item, backline item, AP item, AD,
AD
item,
or
anything
AP,
you want.
yeah.
Yep, support item, everything works on your board right now. So there's like no miss, basically, which is really nice.
Yeah, so between the other two, new recruit seems to make no sense.
Yeah, I think both. Yeah, way better than Final Legend and Curse Crown for sure.
And I hit the Ari.
Oh, very nice.
I had the new recruit at 6, so I completely forgot that I didn't level to 6.
That's fair. I think this is actually the other side of new recruit that can be a little awkward here, right? Is that you actually don't have the units to put on your board right now without rolling. So new recruit also does hit your econ quite a bit if you want to get strong. Because the board strength so new recruit like board strength wise doesn't seem that different than a radiant item because it's a fawn. And it's different for a bit, right? Because the radiant item is better than a fawn, but it's like a fawn and Nico, and you're like, okay, it's not that different. But you also need to invest gold right now to catch up in power with that. Where if you get a radiant item, you just get like. You can be level 5 and still be winning every fight probably. Like you get Radiant Nashor's and you're like Radiant Sunfire Kennen or something. And it does. I think it's important to acknowledge that it does also lean into that line you were talking about. It's less obvious, I think, that it leans into that like level 8 for cost flex stuff. Because it's a little less slap you in the face, right? Like this one says, "Hey man, you get 9 units in a Nico, so you 2-star one of your 4 costs. Hell yeah!" So it's very evident how it's going to help your level 8. Where Radiant Relic, it gets you there with more gold, it gets you there with more HP, and it actually helps you itemize all your stuff a lot better. So while it's not quite as obvious, it is actually a little bit better as well for that style.
Yeah, so the Radiant would have been a lower variance, probably easier top 4 play.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it caps out very similarly.
Higher variance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I think often there is this trade-off that you'll find. Sorry, where you'll have like 2 options, one that's a little higher variance, but maybe higher risk, higher reward, right? And then one is a little bit more consistent, but less of a cap. But I think this is actually a situation where Radiant Relics is actually probably a very similar cap, maybe like a tiny bit less, but probably not. And then it just lowers your variance a bit.
Right. As far as items go, I'm thinking if I go into RE, like I want to use that sword to maybe make like Gunblade, probably. Blue buff GS Gunblade. With the cloak, I can make Spark, I can make Dragon Claw, which would go really well like to make a super tank with the Ormogs and Bramble. That's kind of like game plan.
Yeah, I think leading into RE here is really good. Yeah, Rod would have been the best for sure, but that's okay. You can definitely finish Cloak. I think the problem with finishing Cloak might just be that there's going to be a lack of Shred potentially, Shred/Thunder on your board. Right, you can't go even Shroud, you can't go Spark, which It's a little hard. It's kind of the awkward part about having to finish the sword item right now, which again kind of harkens back, I guess, to the rating relics thing, right? Where like items just get a little easier.
Yeah.
Because and it's not like you have bad items at all. It's just you're probably going to be lacking a pretty crucial part of your board where you don't actually have any anti heal or any shred or slender yet. So you obviously should be leaning a little more towards Ari because you have an Ari already. But without Spark or Shiv or anything, or like a Ziggs hit, it could be a little tough. Not that it's
Yeah.
again undoable; it's just a little bit harder. You're a little bit more reliant
I'm
on
still
getting the right
holding
things
all
from
of these.
creeps. The Heartsteel guys,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And Big Shot, I'm like, hey, maybe it's still there.
I mean, if you roll down, you hit Dez, it's totally fine, right?
Yeah. Like basically, this is what I was doing last patch with Disco and Pentakill, like just flexing between the two, and then I'm like seeing if I could figure out a way to do that in this patch.
Yep. I mean, that's fair. That's fair, and I think it's good to like experiment with lines a bit, especially towards the start of a patch. Um, I think the problem you might run into a bit is that your comp is going to be kind of like jack of all trades, master of none, right? Like you have your augments are
Yeah.
very much in. You basically need really high quality units to hold your items, in like to make use of that font. Otherwise, you don't have a great board. So it's really hard to say like basically you need to play like a bunch of extra spell levers or like a bunch of extra big shots, like some big vertical kind of probably to or like just a lot of again really high quality 5 costs and stuff to make this board really pop on 8. And you're not like the richest person in the world. You're not super poor either, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to get the unit quality necessary, I think, to make that happen. Yeah, now
Yeah.
items are very awkward.
Items are really messed up now. I'm like trying not to slam the last items because I want to do the roll down and then see where the cards land.
Yeah, I think that's smart. If you slam anything here, I think it gets very tough. But you also don't
And I
have like
just
quite enough
exited.
money. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I just gave up on the Heart Steel as line because I just need to hit more gold because I feel kind of poor.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, and the reason is right that you need to put a ninth unit on your board. You need to put an extra unit on your board every turn, and that's expensive.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't think about that as the reason I was so poor. Okay, that's a very good point.
it's expensive. It also just
So
means
really,
that yeah, the extra slot's tough to fill.
yeah. So with new recruit, you want to lean towards taking it when you're like win streaking or already more rich than
Yeah,
like
you want a
average,
ton of
probably.
gold, and I think one of the biggest things is you want to take when you have we have a ton of gold in 8 and maybe like a 5 cost already, and you can look for like a 2-star 5 cost or something. There's one tournament game I played during KDA Cup where I took it in a spot where I had like a big Hearthstone cash out. I was like a billion gold on 8 with a Jhin already, and I just hit Jhin 2 with an
Mhm.
Eco, and then just had like a really good board because you're level 8 with the 2-star 5 cost and infinite frontline because you had all that gold. And so it's better. It's
Right.
something that's a little bit better to take from behind. Again, because it can be a little expensive. It can be a little hard to find that good unit to play on your board, and also it's not going to be that effective unless you get something very high quality or something very impactful, right? If you're just playing like a random Lulu, is that really a prismatic augment? Probably not.
Right. Okay. So I'm rolling prismatic ticket.
Mhm.
Probably not overwhelming force since I'm leaning Ari. Although if I already had like a Kali, then maybe. Uh,
Mhm.
but probably out of these three, Jeweled Lotus.
Yeah, I think Jewel Lotus is definitely the safe pick here. I think if you have a little bit more gold, overwhelming force is actually really good because, again, like we just said, you're gonna have a lot of units on your board, so you need to have ways to make them high quality, and items do that, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not terrible if you have more gold, but I think it's really unlikely that you hit like RE2 and Z2 or like RE2 and Ez2 or anything like that, right? So, uh, yeah, you just want to try and find some way to pump some value into the 4 cost you will hit, which is probably one of them, right? But
Yeah. Okay. And then I need to be holding hold E for the Z out.
yeah, that's definitely an
I
important note
haven't.
to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, I haven't played that line. Okay. So then now,
Well, no, you got to put every single item on. What the heck?
yeah, I just have a million items. But I'm
I
basically
think
thinking I already have a lot of items, and I don't have any clear units on who's going to use those items. So I'm like, maybe Joe Lotus would be the safe out. But then I guess to your point, if I have more units, like
items
odds
become
are
really
I would
good.
find somebody to be able to use the units.
Yeah, I think it's actually fine to take. I think you don't take blinding speed. I think Unleashed Arcana is a lot easier to take because you already have that RE. And so what you can do, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't need to hit chosen. Basically, if you take the AD ones, you have to hit like chosen Z or hit like chosen Ez or something to make it work really right, right? Because especially if it's a melee unit, it needs to be 2-star to be very effective because it has an HP pool that is going to go down pretty quickly when it's getting hit by a bunch of random stuff potentially. Whereas if you're playing around, you already have an RE, like these AP items are always going backliners, and if you hit chosen Z, it means you can just like go. You can just go like GS or like Deathblade something something Z, and then just have like blue buff Rabadon. You can literally like Deathblade Gunblade Z, right? In this kind of situation, and then just
Mhm.
go Jeweled Gauntlet Rabadon's blue buff on your RE, and you have a board at least, and then you have itemized things, and you get some value, some really good value out of your augment. So I think it actually ends up being better than Jeweled Lotus, where obviously Jeweled Lotus works well with the units too, but it's going to be you're going to have like one unit doing damage on a board where like a lot of the value should be having a lot of high quality good units. Unless if you manage to like Mubutu and Asona and stuff, I think it can be very good, but I think it's unlikely that happens. And then if you do hit like Chosen Ari and you have Unleashed Arcana, you can just put the items on some random AP unit. I think it's a lot easier to find some random backline AP unit than it is to find some random
Yeah, just
backline
like
AD
Lulu or
unit.
Seraphine to hold
Yeah,
it until
exactly.
someone better. Yeah.
Yep. And it gives
Okay.
you an excuse to play like 5 Spellweaver or something, right? Which I think you want an excuse to play some vertical here, ideally.
Yeah.
Not that Jewel Lotus is bad, because I don't think it's super bad or anything. I think it's a little bit harder to play around.
Yeah. So I'm like so poor here.
Yep.
And so I'm like thinking if I roll more, it's like odds are I'm not going to find anything. So I'm just thinking I'll play the Vex with the blue buff.
Yeah, I think you can try to stop. Um, it's tough because you're going to be losing rounds for sure still. Right, you don't
Yeah.
really have the money to replace your front line, and your front line's like a little bit suspect. um, and you don't have the money to really find the backliners either. For what it's worth, I think this is a tough spot, and I think a lot of it. At this point, you're playing damage control, right? You're in like a slightly awkward
Yeah.
situation where you don't have the gold to match the new recruit, and so you have to find some way to make it work. I actually think rolling more is probably a little bit better. You probably need something a little more impactful because if you take Vex in state, you're probably just going to end up dying. As unfortunate as
Okay.
it is.
And my front line is shit too. Like I'm still
It is,
I
yeah, it's
wanted to
rough. It's very rough.
ideally I would find a chosen like frontline 4 cost and then at least Ari has time to like deal
Mhm.
damage, or maybe I could even just put blue buff on the Jhin. But like my
Yep.
front line is just shit.
Yeah, it's really tough to get it better because you need so much, right? You need a backliner, you need a frontliner, you need like 2 backliners, you need like a frontliner, also something to hold the TG. It's hard to get all these units on the board potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like new recruit it can be very very hard to play around if you're not really rich, because
Yeah.
where do you find the gold to play 9 units on your board at 8? It can be hard. It can be very hard.
Okay. Yeah. I never thought about that dimension with new recruit. Okay.
I mean, for what this is not like a terrible board. I think double Lulu, yeah, is probably your best bet. I don't know. Yeah, a double Lulu is probably your best bet, just it's like a very, um,
Hmm.
double hyperpop value is very good. This guy has 3 Nikos on their bench. Holy shit! What is going over there? Yeah, the item situation is very unfortunate for sure. It's tough.
And I
And
actually
it's one of
won
those
this
things where
fight,
like,
so
okay, yeah, that's pretty good. It's very good. That's
but yeah,
definitely a
the
good fight to
items are
get.
really bad.
Yeah. I think
Okay, so I get emo.
it's just tough. Yeah. I the Vex. I mean, Vex is very strong for what it's worth. If you can find some way to get to replace frontline, if you natural some really good shops, it's one of those things where like basically the decisions you made, like the reason behind them was very very good, right? You're not like you wanted to play on 8, you were playing game around playing on 8, so you took new recruit because it seemed like at first glance like it was something that's going to be really good for capping out on 8. But then the problem there was
Hmm.
that you didn't quite have the resources to support that, and it ended up you had basically had to play damage control after that,
Yeah.
which is tough.
So I
It's
have
one of
the
the things where you're,
duplicators.
yep. It's one of those things where it's like it's not like anything in particular went super wrong, but like gives us a spot where like things had to go right to do well, like for you to do well, right? Oh, yeah, Jazz MF is great. Sounds good. Problem is, like, Jhin obviously needs frontline, right?
But
And
yeah, and in hindsight, I realized that after this fight that my frontline was still shit. And so I probably should have I shouldn't have sold the Kaisa. I should have kept the Kaisa and then rolled for a frontline chosen.
yeah, I think if something frontline would be really nice here. It's then this is identifying what units need to succeed. Right? We talked about this at the beginning, where it's like you want to identify what a unit, what a headliner, what anything in the game needs to succeed to be able to play around it better. Where just like how you want to know when you can buy Corki headliner on stage 1, you also need to know when you can play around Jhin 2. And now you actually have a lot of frontline now, so maybe it
Yeah.
works out. Fuck it, I'm down.
Yeah, Thresh in the stats so far has looked really good. I think he's the highest like average placement forecast.
Oh, really? That's sick. Yeah, I mean, he's great. He was definitely really good last patch too because he got that HP buff. He has like an insane amount of base HP now. It's like 1050 or something, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you can just find some way to get a little bit extra frontline, I think this can be pretty decent. Here's a 6 Guardian angle. I'm down. Yeah, I think that's very good. Yeah, I think that's definitely something you should be looking for. And then you can even just play that out. Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. I think this is great. I think that's a great call. I mean, you just did a really good job identifying what your board needed, right? You really needed more frontline, and so 6 Guardian here gives you a ton more frontline.
Yeah.
And then you can just play, you can find something to play around later on. Also, I've never seen more GSs in a single game in my entire life.
Yeah. And I probably want to get out of this RE at some point.
Yeah, it's a little awkward, right? It's definitely a little awkward. I do actually think that the double what's his face Yorick is probably a little bit better here, just because the 6 Guardian value is so good, and Mosher and Emo aren't doing too much for you. I see.
Yep.
There's right. Right. I mean, not a terrible fight for what it's worth. Not a terrible fight at all. So I think I'm guessing this is, I think, a pretty good example too. What we talked about with consistency in augments, right? Where also your Yorick items are beast mode, but like,
by the way,
you lost the extra HP. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Would you have rolled at 8 to try to hit more 2-stars there, or have gone 9?
I think going 9 here is correct. Yeah, you just need more frontline. The best way to do that really is just, it's like more consistent. Just play 2 Yoriks, I think, at that point, than it is to roll more on 8, because you already have the Thresh 2, right? Maybe you find Nico 2 and a Panth 2 and a Moo 2 if you roll to literally 0, but another Yorick is like a similar amount of extra frontline, and you can definitely hit them later. Yeah, I think this is a good example of where the consistency starts to fall apart a bit because you lost so much extra HP early mid game, right? By not
yeah, they both hit. I was like, what the hell?
It's one of those things, right? Maybe if you save all that extra HP by taking the augment, or like playing around the more impactful immediate moment. Also, wow. Oh, nice.
Yeah,
let's go.
I was very surprised.
Blitz 3 sucks. Where then you're not low HP and you're not potentially losing to like Blitz 3, or like you're not going like 5th or 6th, right? You have enough HP where you're just a solid 4th at worst. And again, with a similar cap, and so you want to find that obviously there's a balance there, but sometimes there's not even necessarily a balance. There's more of just like, okay, this one thing is going to be better here, and identifying it's really important. One thing's going to just be more consistent in general, right?
Who would you put the even shroud on?
I was like, probably the Nico, just because she already has an item on her. It's probably going to be the best. She's probably going to be the tankiest unit on your board, or the tankiest extra unit on your board that you could itemize.
Okay, because I was thinking the Nico has Crown Guard, so I wanted to frontline her to like soak up the shield, but I don't want the even shroud on the front line.
Yeah,
but I could have just moved the Nico to the back.
Yeah, you could just move her back a little bit, or like the big issue is that no matter what happens, she's probably getting hit. Or the Poppy also died immediately, right? Because there's just so much AoE. So there's not like a great way around it, I think, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I think the damage control on 8 was good. It's one of those situations where unintentionally a little bit got in a slightly tough spot consistency wise, right? Where you had to have more gold than you did to make your augments really shine. And it hurt a little bit as a result.
Yeah. So my takeaway is new recruit really should avoid it unless I'm like I have very clear units that I can add in to be strong right now. I should have more gold to be able to actually add
Yes.
in units, and probably value. So I was just I think overemphasizing like, oh, I already have a lot of items, so I don't need more items. But it's more so like thinking about specifically where I have items, and if I have two items on a carry, like that third item is actually really valuable. Whereas if I
Yep.
already had three items on Annie, then it would be less valuable.
Yep. Yeah, because it's harder to get to hit a frontline item than to get a really good thing there, right? But the cool thing is, I think with items, and maybe this is the biggest takeaway, right? Is always look at items as I want more, right? Like items get better with more items. You can never have too many items. If you have, if you have too many items, and your board should just be different, right? Then you should have adapted your board in a way to use your extra items. Maybe instead of playing,
Mm-hmm.
if you feel like you have like an extra IE and an extra BT in your bench that game or something, and you don't know what to do with it because you're playing some cookie cutter RE Sentinel thing or something like that. Let's say a couple patches ago, right? Then it means that you probably just should
Mm-hmm.
be playing that. And instead, you should be playing something that lets you use those items. Maybe you play Zed on your board. Maybe you play a Kali on your board, and you adapt, right? And so you can never really have too many items, and especially the idea of that third item, especially when it's a radiant item, gets so much value, right? Because if a normal item is a multiplier of one, let's say like item wise, right? Like a normal item is like a multiplier of one, or sorry, like 1.5. Abyss item is a multiplier of like 1.75. A radiant item is a multiplier of like 2 or like 2.5. It's a ton, right? It's an insane piece of value. And so if you can get that multiplying against all those other items, you get so much value. And so if you ever have two items on anything, you should pretty much always pick the radiant item, I think, because it's just, yeah, it's very good. That third item gives you so much multiplicative value, especially when it is such a high quality third item, because it makes those other items that much better, right? Which is why if you ever have the ability to get two radiant items on a unit, holy shit. That's why Radiant TG is good, right? They can be two random Radiant items, but because even though they still multiply against each other, or rather, even if they're like random, the fact that they still multiply against each other makes them still really impactful. That's why like Radiant TG is just like the most broken stage 2 element of the game. I beat a guy with Cruel Pact on 2-3 and killed him yesterday because they had Radiant TG. He went 7 with 4 HP and just died. He just had Radiant TG and Mumu with like two random items, and he couldn't kill it. It just killed his whole board, and that's the power of radiant items, right? And so if you can get two tailored radiant items, if you get like Radiant Rageblade, Radiant Deathblade, Jinx, or something, holy shit, you just win the game. It's so much value. Very similar with like, yeah.
Does Radiant TG work with Lucky Gloves? Like, does
Yes,
the Radiant then always? It does.
it
Okay.
does. It's really broken. It's really broken.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is I always wondered like, let's say you try to go for like a 3-star Riven, would Lucky Gloves with Radiant TG on Riven be better than 3 items, like
That one's
normal
tough.
items, or
Yeah, I think it can be a little hard with things like Riven, where so Riven's like a little bit more item hungry, right? Riven
okay,
and Yone
like
to a
let's say
degree as
Yone.
well. Yeah, so like Riven really wants QSS. Without QSS, she doesn't really function. And both of them
Hmm.
to an extent also need healing, right? Yone's obviously he has a lot more in his kit built in. He has both an Omnivamp. He doesn't really need to get CC immunity because a lot of his damage is in his cast instead of his auto attacks. So Riven, I would not Radiant TG, right? I think you need two specific things. But Yone, it's kind of up in the air. Where if he doesn't roll a healing item one round, it might be kind of doomed. But if he does, then you probably just insta win every fight. So it's like a little up in the air. But yeah, in general, if you ever items always will play against each other, right? So again, if you ever have the ability to get that third item, that's going to be the thing that spikes you the hardest right now. And it's going to scale very well later in the game because items are just really strong. Having an extra item on your board on level 8 is pretty, especially if it's a rating item, is just as much value as also having you know um, an extra unit on your board, especially if you don't have the goal to make that extra unit something very impactful, right?
Yeah. So I guess part of that question, because let me pull up the game again. Is there a scenario where you would roll at 3-2? I forget what happened in.
Yeah, I think if you take new recruit, you probably have to roll for 3 Spellweaver. Um, it's a little tough, but I think you
Because
probably
I
want to
think
roll for 3 spot. You do hit it
okay,
eventually, right? I think you hit it like the next turn or something off carousel. There you do have a really big
yeah.
3-2 and 3-3. Um,
Because yeah, I lost.
oh, you did
I
three.
think
You
I
did get
only
3-3.
won. I won one of four. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I only won three
it's
five.
tough.
So
I mean,
so in hindsight, I probably should have leveled and then rolled, but then I'd be like super poor. But I probably would have preserved a lot of HP,
I think what you
and I
probably end
probably
up
could
doing
have
this
just
game.
streaked.
Yeah, I think this game, if you continue to recruit, it actually ends up being like more of a Lulu reroll angle or something, like a Lulu or Vex reroll
Yeah, that
angle,
makes
just
sense.
because you end up on 7 and you can make sure those units are upgraded and high quality, right? Because
Although that
again, getting to
wastes
8 is
the
just hard.
duplicator.
Well, it's still, I mean, it's still good
Like
for being a
it,
2-star 3 or a 3-star 3 cost, right? Like
mhm.
that dupe becoming like a 3-star Vex is pretty good, or becoming it could still be like a 2-star Ari or something just on 7 with a Lulu. There's still ways to make it work. Again, it's not the most value in the world, which I think the big
Yeah,
takeaway is like obviously you should know how to play around the new recruit, and it's good that we talked about it. But the big takeaway is probably just don't take new recruit in this spot because
don't
it's
take
very
it.
difficult to play around. Yeah, that's one of I think that this is a big thing in
Yeah,
TFT is that often if you feel like you're having an issue in a part of the game, it actually stems from something beforehand, right? Where like the answer like the answer to the situation is not how do I play around new recruit better, which again though it is important to be able to play the damage control and to make turn the game into like a 6 after a mistake like that. But it's more so like how do I avoid putting myself in that spot in the first place? And the more careful you are early to avoid that like butterfly effect, like something on 2-1 hurting your stage 4, the better your games will be. And so that's why it's really important to like really think through all the decisions and be cognizant of what they actually mean for your game.
okay. So if you were if you were forced to take new recruit here, how much gold would you roll down? Because it would take 20 gold just a level, so I have 30 gold left. Like you roll
It's
to like
tough. Yeah.
20, 10,
You
because you
probably
have
roll
three
until you're
spots to
stronger than
fill.
everyone. Yeah, you probably want to roll until you're
Okay.
stronger than everyone is the answer, right? Because yeah, like if you don't necessarily have to roll. If you feel like you have to roll to literally to 0 to be stronger than I Heart RuneScape there in first place, then maybe you don't roll. It's going to be very lobby
Yeah.
dependent. I think the answer to that lies in the lobby dynamic, not in your own board. I would say. Um, it's tough. It is tough, and I think it's important again to be able to do that, to be able to play around that well. But
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I get that answer is going to be very lobby dependent, and that's I guess the other big takeaway is that which we talk about all the time, but it's an important thing to always remind ourselves that your decisions in TFT should almost never be made solely on about like on your own board, about your own
Right.
resources. It has to be lobby dynamic.
Okay. So then the intent there would be roll to be stronger than the rest of the because and I'm like the matchmaking is the top four, like three guys in the lobby. Um, so I need to be stronger than them, and then the intent would be to streak the rest of stage three, and then hopefully like hit a bunch of Lulus probably.
Yep, something like that
Or if I just happen to hit another RE, then I could duplicate it
for
and
sure.
be really strong from there.
For sure, for sure. You can actually put like Seraphine roll from this spot, or again Vex roll or something. Anything. There's so many things in the game that use blue shoju. This is also the beauty. I'm gonna do it. This is a quick little ad again for that playstyle I talked about in the beginning of just like slamming items that work on your things right now.
Yeah.
Because there are so many things in the game that can use these items. There's so many things in the game that can use Shojin or Adaptive Helm, or there's like there's just every single item in the game can be used on something right now. So there's like really no problem with slamming anything you want because you can find a way to use it as long as you're cognizant of what that implication is going to be as you slam it, right? If you know when you slam Runeans you have to play
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, or Z, then you'll be fine. If you slam it and you're like, holy shit, what do I put this on later in the game? Then that's probably pretty bad, right? And that's the situation that players get into, which is why I think they can't slam things. But if you, as long as you have an idea as what that item can be and you're doing it, you don't slam necessarily everything you have, but anything that's good enough and that you have a plan for potentially, then you'll have way more success and way more consistency.